Please be seated. At this time, we're going to begin the funeral services of Dr. Shayle Jay Gerstein. Rabbi Yitzchak Falk will be officiating. We welcome those of you who are joining us online. For those of you who are here, please take a moment to be sure that your cell phones have been turned off, and the family is requesting that we just wear masks other than when speaking from the podium. This time we're going to begin the sacred funeral ceremony. Rabbi Yitzchak Falk.
Yeah, we'll do some Tehillim at the end. Okay. I'd like to call Rabbi Tzvi Engel from Congregation Or Torah to say the first parak of Tehillim, Tehillim Tet Vav.
Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai mi yagur ba'aholecha, mi yishkon behar kodshecha, holech tamim ufoel tzedek, v'dover emet bilvavo, lo ragal al leshono, lo asa l're'ehu ra'a, v'cherpa lo nasa al kerovo, nivze be'einav nim'as, ve'et yir'ei Adonai yechabed, nishba lehara v'lo yamir, kaspo lo natan b'neshech, v'shochad al naki lo lakach, osei eile lo yimot le'olam.
Tehillim Chaf Gimel. Mizmor LeDavid. Adonai roi lo echsar, benot deshe yarbitzeni almei menuchot yinhaleni. Nafshi yeshovev yancheni b'magli tzedek leman shemo, gam ki elech begates al mavet lo irara ki ata imadi. Shivtecha umishantecha hema yenachamuni. Taroch lefanai shulchan neged zorai. Dishanta v'shemen roshi, kosi revaya. Ach, tov v'chesed yurdefuni, kol yemei chayai. V'shafti beveit Adonai, le'orech yamim. We are gathered here today to give final honor and respect to Dr. Shayle Jay Gerstein, the husband of the late Marilyn Gerstein, loving father of Dina and her husband Howard Levy, Michael Gerstein, Joel Gerstein, and proud Saba of Gavi, Samantha, Joey, and Michal Levy, Samuel and Max Gerstein. Adored son of the late Morton and the late Diana Gerstein, dear brother of Honey and the late Sherwin Shapiro, the late Norman Gerstein, and the late Sherwin Gerstein. Cherished uncle of many nieces and nephews and wonderful cousins. I'm going to call up Dina and Michael to share words with us.
When is enough time? There's never enough time. I'm convinced of that now. I am beyond grateful to God that my dad was here to share so many wonderful moments in my life and those of my children. I'm also so thankful to God that he lived to the old age of 85 and stayed 14 years after my mom passed away. I know we were fortunate and very lucky. Over the years, especially shortly after her passing, I wasn't always so sure that my dad was going to stick around. When my mom passed away, as insane as it was, I promised her that I would do everything in my power to help my dad live a full life and grow old. And he did that. Although even at the ripe age of 85, it still doesn't feel like enough time. Wednesday, as I sat by his hospital bed, holding his hand and talking to him, I thought, and I told him that I still could not fathom my life without him in it. I still wanted more. We still had more occasions to celebrate, including our youngest child. You need to sit here. Yeah. Michal's upcoming bat mitzvah. However, my dad decided that day that he was ready to go and join my mom. Last night, as I sat at my desk trying to figure out where to begin, how to capture the unique essence of my father and do the incredibly special man that he was justice with my words. Honestly, I find it nearly impossible. It's an impossible task because he was so many things rolled into one. So I've decided to start with a few adjectives: loving, kind, sweet, health conscious, giving, gentle, and brilliant, and above all, one of a kind. A man dedicated to education and his community. Just looking at my father, especially in the last 6 years when he started needing the assistance of a walker, one may never realize all the wonderful layers that are wrapped into that cute, elderly gentleman with a walker. Then you'd be really missing out. It reminds me of the old saying, never judge a book by its cover. Beneath that cute, very, very shy older man is a man with the cutest dimples when he smiles, blue eyes that sparkle when they're happy, which is very often, a very intelligent, sweet, keenly observant man who may be quiet but notice literally everything around him. I think there is something to the saying that you always have to watch the quiet ones. By looking at him, the average person would not know how he was doing or really who he was. He was a closed book until you took the time to know him. But once you did, your life was much richer for it. My dad was the king of understatement and quite humble. My father graduated from the University of Chicago, obtained a master's degree at Northwestern, and then a PhD from the University of Illinois in Bloomington, while my mom was pregnant with me. Growing up, he read the encyclopedia and dictionary for fun. He loved reading about everything and knew all facets and details about Judaism and Jewish rituals, to the point where some people just assumed he was a rabbi. He literally seemed to know everything about everything. And we used to joke in our house that he was a walking encyclopedia. Not to mention that he could direct you through every side street from Hyde Park all the way to Highland Park. He was Waze before there was Waze. Anytime we had a question growing up, or even last week, we would always go and ask Daddy. Some questions even came up about this funeral and the Shiva, and I found myself saying that I had to ask Dad because he would know the answer. My dad was also the classic nerd, straight out of a movie, right down to the pocket protector and the checkered sport coat with the padded elbows. Growing up, I just assumed that everyone's dad who worked in a school looked like that. My dad worked for the Chicago Public Schools for 37 years in various capacities, including being a counselor, working his way up to assistant principal of Roosevelt High School, principal of Brown Elementary, and finally as administrator in the Chicago Public School system. He absolutely loved being an educator and working in education. Education was his passion. Having a hand in educating the next generation meant everything to him. Throughout the years, if my dad felt some children at one of his schools needed anything from school supplies to winter coats to winter clothes or anything else, he would buy it for them. He did that quietly for many, many years. If his secretaries took the bus to school in the winter, he would arrange to take them home and bring them to and from school, so they didn't have to wait for the bus in the cold weather. He was the most generous, kind-hearted person I have ever known, and he has been an example to his children and his grandchildren. No matter what he had or what he didn't have, he would give anyone who needed it more, anything that he had. Despite my dad's very demanding job as an assistant principal, you need to turn around, I can't, or principal, he always had time for my brothers and me. Even as young children, Michael, Joel, and I always remember my dad singing Oifen Pepperchick, a Yiddish lullaby, to us as he put us to sleep each night. I myself can still hear those words in my head. There was never a point in my life where I felt that he didn't make time for me, whether it was correcting my English assignments, talking about politics in college, which was my passion, taking me to Fashion Warehouse and sitting quietly in the chair while I picked out what I liked without parental commentary, or taking my calls during the day when I was an elementary school student at Hilla Torah. Since my mom didn't drive, my dad also did all the grocery shopping and ran most of the errands. And my favorite thing growing up was going shopping with him at Dominic's. I loved having him all to myself to talk to and pick out fruit. He taught me what was ripe, how to tell if a fruit was ripe. I always had my dad, and he helped me also to fall in love with books by making a big deal out of getting me a library card at Northtown Library as a small child and taking me there once a week. I guess I also owe the fact that I'm a lawyer to him because he had a large book collection in his office, and one day I was bored and read a book about Louis Brandeis from his bookshelf. That book changed my life at the tender age of 12. After that, I knew I wanted to be a lawyer. My dad was also in charge of packing our school lunches when we were young, and he used to pack very healthy lunches with the exception of a chocolate pudding. And that was awesome because I was always able to trade the pudding for someone else's sugary snack. My dad was also the one who picked me up from ballet class at the J in the evenings and made me milkshakes when I came home. It was always exciting on Shabbos afternoons growing up when my parents would take a nap when we saw my dad get up and put on his park hat with the little brown and yellow patches and orange flowers. And that meant that he was going to take us to Lerner Park. My brothers and I are very blessed that there are too many amazing memories with him for us to count. However, the one thing my dad absolutely was handy. He could not fix anything or build even the simplest of shelving units. He once built these white cabinets in the bathroom that looked like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. And when I married my husband, Howard, it was a total bonus that he actually knew how to use a screwdriver and a pliers, and he could build straight shelves. My father's life has never been what I would call easy. He grew up on the poorer side, but always had enough to eat. And his mother, who I am named after, was the light of his life. But she developed bone cancer at a young age. So my dad helped her and did her shopping to make things easier for her. Unfortunately, she died in the next room of their home when he was in his early 20s, and my Aunt Honey was a teenager. My mother then died of pancreatic cancer after battling it for 2.5 years, and when my parents had been married for 38 years and enjoying their retirement. My father was by her side every step of the way while she was sick, doing what he could to help her and make her life better. He set a real high bar throughout my life as a devoted and loving husband. And then his beloved baby brother, Sherwin, then died of cancer at the age of 62. Yet despite all that pain and loss in his life, he never, ever became bitter, and he always maintained his cheerful demeanor. He would adapt to his new reality and find a reason to go on. His answer always was, "That's just life." After our mother died, it was us, his children, that he was concerned about, more than himself. He wanted to ensure that we were okay. Even when my father's health deteriorated after the death of my mother, and overnight he looked like he had aged minimally a decade, he still soldiered on. Through every bout of pneumonia, when he used to call me to take him to the hospital instead of calling 911, both spinal fusions, his neck fusion, his broken back, and his broken hip, he fought his way back to recovery and kept going, while continuing to find joy, happiness, and purpose in his life. My children have very fond memories of the Evanston-Alden rehab facility after each of those surgeries and recoveries. By far, I think my father's greatest joy in life was becoming a grandfather. That literally was everything to him. Anytime he looked at or talked about one of his 6 grandchildren, his whole face would literally just light up. He took an interest in everything that the kids did, whether it was Siddur presentations, ice skating shows, piano recitals, or even soccer or baseball, which he really didn't like. He came to everything. everything. Be it special programs in Florida for Samuel and Max, or Grandparents' Day at Akiba Schechter in Hyde Park for Gavi, or everything in between, such as State Fair at Hillel, my dad was there. When I casually mentioned one night that Samantha was having some trouble with her multiplication tables, the next thing I knew, my dad made her a multiplication chart and flashcards to help her. When Gavi was born, my parents used to come to Lakeview 3 days a week to take care of Gavi while Howard and I worked, and they later took care of both him and Samantha at their home in West Rogers Park, once Howard and I moved to Skokie. Howard and I used to say that my dad did all the physical stuff with the kids, like changing the diapers, getting down on the floor to play with them, and my mom was the common sense part of the team. My dad embodied the term absent-minded professor. My dad used to walk Gavi all over Lakeview to see the boats, and years later to Indian Boundary Park to see the animals before they were gone. He even stayed over several days before Michal was born and took care of all 3 kids by himself, including taking Joey to nursery school orientation at the Little Hill of Torah when we finally left for the hospital to have Michal. Spending time with his grandchildren and watching them grow was one of the greatest joys of his life. Michal and Max came along after our mother had passed away, and their births and the fact that they were both named for our mother, Marilyn, really brought a great deal of joy back into my father's life after the very difficult death of our mother. After the passing of our mother, my dad had Shabbos dinner at our house every Friday night, holidays, and of course, birthdays and any other celebrations. He has been an integral part of our lives and of those of our children and his grandchildren since the day they were born. My house is literally filled with his presence. On Friday nights, the kids always knew that Saba was bringing a special fruit dessert, chocolate bars, and a printed version of the week's Hillel Torah highlights. He would also print out any pictures that the kids were in from school that week and make a huge deal about it. One of my dad's absolute favorite things was being part of the Hillel Torah Grandparents Club and receiving their emails. I think one memory that stands out most in my mind was for years after my mother passed away, my dad wanted to get the kids birthday gifts. However, he had no idea what to buy them because my mom always bought all the presents. So for birthdays and Hanukkahs each year, he would give them an Israeli bond and an electric toothbrush. And they had a lot of electric toothbrushes. I remember being terrified after my mom passed away that my dad would soon follow her, especially after each health challenge that he had. I credit several things that he was blessed to live another 14 plus years without my mother. And those are his grandchildren, Ezra Israel, and Hillel Torah. My dad's involvement with his friends and with Ezra Israel meant literally the world to him. The shul was a very special and important part of his life. He especially loved dressing up on Purim for the Purim Carnival in his cowboy hat and his red bandana and going to the yearly picnic. He also loved attending each and every play and every event at Hillel Torah and watching the plays get tweaked and changed from year to year with each grandchild. Out of all the things my father instilled in me and my brothers was the importance of a day school education for my children and the love of Israel. Both my parents were not wealthy people by any means. They were educators. But to them, spending all they had to give their children a Jewish day school education was very important to them. Jewish identity, Jewish education was what they valued as essential for the next generation. And they both also had a deep love for Israel and visited Israel many times. In 2014, we were fortunate to take a family trip to Israel for Gavi and Samantha's bar and bat mitzvahs. My dad came with us on that trip, and we went everywhere. Just being there gave him an extra spring in his step, and he looked like a new man. He even climbed down a tunnel against the advice of our tour guide. I guess the sum of my dad's legacy is that his life was always about family, family, family. to his very last breath. Wednesday, he was tired. He had had enough, and he was ready to go. But he waited to make sure he spent time with each one of his children. And he especially waited all day and part of the night for Michael to arrive from North Carolina. For everything my dad may have thought I did for him over the years, he did so much more for me. To his very last minute on this earth, he was one of the bedrocks of my life. For everything he was and everything he taught us, and especially the twinkle in his eyes, my brothers and I know that our Father will live on in us and is still with us in spirit. And we take comfort in knowing that now his body is at peace and he can dance again because he loved to dance. I speak for my brothers and myself in saying quite inadequately that our dad will be profoundly missed every single day. And though it has been a very short time since his passing, he already is. I myself take comfort in knowing that my dad absolutely, positively knew how very much he was loved by his family.
I'd like to call up Samantha Levy.
Everything and anything. Our Saba was our everything and came to everything. No matter what it was, Saba was there. One of us kids was always in charge of saving Saba a seat at everything because Saba always showed up. From our Hilator sitter plays to graduation, our Saba was there. When Michal was the first kid in our family to learn piano, Saba would come and listen to Michal practice piano while tapping his fingers to the beat. He also made sure to attend her piano recital and was so proud of how far she'd come. Saba also was at every Friday night dinner for years. He always would come, sit in the same spot each week, and eat his chopped liver. When our mom forgot the chopped liver for Saba, that was a catastrophe, and someone was for sure making a last-minute run to the store because there was no Friday night dinner without Saba bringing the Hilator highlights over, bringing a chocolate bar of fruit, and him eating his chopped liver. Israel and Judaism was also his everything. For each grandchild, every birthday, Saba would get Israel bonds. He'd print out the paper saying he bought us an Israel bond and bring it to our house for a birthday, and sometimes he'd also bring a toothbrush. Saba also came with us to Israel in 2014 on a big family trip, and the smile he had on his face when he came to Israel with us was a smile we'll never forget. Although he was not smiling when my mom almost let him roll down a hill in Svat because she got distracted and let go of the wheelchair. But don't worry, my dad grabbed onto him really fast. Saba's love for Israel will forever be ingrained in us. Saba also had a special place in our heart and in his heart for Ezra's Israel. The annual Purim Carnival is something Saba looked forward to, but also something we looked forward to. We've gone to Ezra's for Purim for as long as we remember, and Saba was always there making sure Joey got a bingo card and Michal won a fish. Another annual thing we shared with our Saba was the 4th of July. We'd go to his apartment to play bingo or chess. Saba would make sure to teach all the grandchildren how to play chess. Once it was clearly past our bedtime, the fireworks show would start, and we'd just sit back and watch the fireworks for a long time. It was tradition. We had many traditions with Saba because he was at everything and anything. Saba was our everything. We love you, Saba.
In the first of the two parshiot that we're going to read tomorrow morning, Parshat Matot, the tribes of Reuven and Gad want to settle on the other side of the Jordan River because it's such good pasture land. And Moshe makes it very clear that this will not be acceptable if they're planning to not take part in the war to conquer the rest of the territory, the other side of the Jordan. And the two tribes come back and they make a proposal, and they say to Moshe, Gidrot son nivneh, we'll build flocks for our sheep, limiknenu for our flock, po, here on this side of the Jordan, varim litapenu, and cities for our children, which will stay behind. And there's a subtle shift in language, and Moshe accepts this proposal. He agrees and he says, Benu lechem arim letapchem, you can build cities for your children, Gederot litzonechem, and pens for your flock. And Rashi points out this switch, that they said first we're going to build structures for the animals, then cities for the kids. And Moshe comes back and says, no, you build cities for the kids and then structures for your animals. And Rashi says they were more worried about their money than their children, and therefore they put the flocks first. And Moshe is telling them subtly, ha'ikar of a tefel, that what's most important should take priority, and what's secondary should always be secondary. And therefore, when Moshe accepts their offer, he changes the order, and they understood this, and the cities for the children take priority over the pens for the flocks. And I think when I was sitting yesterday with Shayle's kids and we were talking, this idea jumped out at me, because Shayle was someone who really had his priorities in order. He understood he worked incredibly hard. He accomplished a lot. He was an teacher, an assistant principal, a principal. I'm sure all of those children and those teachers and all those people he worked with gained a tremendous amount just from the 5.5 years I knew Shayle. I know that everyone he worked with must have valued him to the moon. But he understood that at the end of the day, that was secondary, that his family was the priority. And I think all of the kids talked about, no matter how hard he was working, no matter how late he would come home, he always had time, I think Dina mentioned this, to edit their papers, to be there for them, always had time for them. And of course, this extended on very much when the grandchildren were born. They were the priority of his life. And the second priority, as has been mentioned as well, and this was incredibly clear to me when I started working at Ezras Israel, was that Ezras Israel was a tremendous, tremendous priority for Shayle. The last conversation we had was about him needing my article for the memorial book, which I still need to write. But that he was, even though he had moved to Park Plaza, it was rarer for him to come to Ezras Israel. He was much more often on Shabbat going to be at the synagogue at Park Plaza. He was still involved in running our shul on an ongoing basis. He, of course, was a past president. He was on the executive board for a tremendously long time, a member for 46 years. And the memorial book was his baby, and he was the editor. He put it all together each and every year. And that he understood that Jewish community is built with hard work by many, many of the members. And that's something that was right after his family, his number 2 priority. When thinking about Shayle, the thing that jumped out at me was how many, even though I've known him for 5.5 years, how much I learned about his life that he never told me, because he's so humble. I walked away yesterday after meeting with the family just in shock at how many gaps I had in his biography, because he was not one to brag in the slightest. And therefore, that he had so much accomplishment professionally and the things that he'd done, the prestigious schools he'd attended, is not something that he would ever have brought up unless it was a natural part of, what was going on. And the second thing that when I think about Shayle, and this is the family has mentioned, was just what a kind, sweet person he was. And not just sometimes, but I can't think of any interaction I ever had with him in which he wasn't friendly and nice and well-spoken. An incredible consistency in Menschlichkeit of just someone who had really refined his midot, his qualities, didn't make a big show of himself in any way. But now that he's gone, we realize just what an unbelievable hole there's obviously in the Gerstein family, in the community at Ezras Israel, and of course in the Jewish people and the community here in Chicago. He's truly someone who said a little and did a lot, and his memory should be a blessing for both his family, the shul, and the entire Jewish community, and he should be a Melitz Yosher for all of us. Because we are both Erev Shabbat and Rosh Chodesh, it affects our service. We do not have the Kelmali Rachamim this morning. We're going to conclude with two more prakim of Tehillim, Tehillim Tet Zayin. Michtam LeDavid, Shemreini El ki chziti vach, Amart l'Adonai Adonai ata, v'tovati balalecha, l'kedoshim asher ba'aretz hema, v'adirei kol chefsevam, yirbu atzvotam acher maharu, bal asich niskehem midam, uval asa et shmotam al sifatai, Adonai menat chelki v'chosi, Ata tomich gorali, Chavalim naflu li b'ne'imim, Af nachlat shafra alai, Avarech et Adonai asher yatzani, Af leilot yisruni chiliotai. Shiviti Adonai lenegdi tamid, Ki mimini bal emot, Lechein semach libi v'yagel kvodi, Af besari yishkon levetach, Ki lo ta'azov nafshi l'shol, Lo titain chasidecha lerot shachat. Todieni orech chaim, seva smachot et panecha niimot v'minecha netzach. Guard me, God, for in you I have taken refuge. You have said to the Lord, you are my Lord, I have no good beyond you. As for the holy ones who are in the earth, and the mighty in whom is all my desire, their sorrows will multiply, those that run to other gods. Their blood libations will I not pour out, nor take their names upon my lips. The Lord is my allotted portion and my share. You sustain my fate. Portions have fallen to me in pleasant places. Lovely indeed is my estate. I will bless the Lord who has given me counsel. My conscience admonishes me at night. I have set the Lord before me always. Because God is at my right hand, I shall not falter. Therefore my heart rejoices and my entire being exults. Also my body will rest secure. For you will not abandon me to the grave, nor will you let your devout one see destruction. You will make known to me the path of life. In your presence is fullness of joy. There is delight at your right hand for eternity. Tehillim Kuf Chaf Aleph. Shir Lamalot. Zainai Harim Ein Yavo Ezri. Ezri mi'im Adonai, Osei Shemaim va'aretz. Al yitain lamot raglecha, al yanum shomrecha. Hine lo yanum lo yishan, shomer Yisrael. Adonai shomerecha, Adonai tzilecha al yad yaminecha. Yomam hashemesh le'yakeka v'yareach balayla. Adonai yishmorcha mikol ra, yishmor et nafshecha. Adonai yishmor tzitzecha vo'echa mi'ata v'adolam. A song of ascents. I lift up my eyes to the mountains. From where will my help come? My help comes from the Lord, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot falter, your guardian will not slumber. Behold, the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. The Lord is your guardian, the Lord is your protection by your right side. By day the sun will not harm you, nor the moon by night. The Lord will guard you from all evil. The Lord will guard your life. The Lord will guard your going and coming from now and forever. May the neshama, may the soul of Dr. Shayle Jay Gerstein, Yaakov Shaul ben Mordechai, may Tehei nishmato nitzor b'tzor ha'chaim. May his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life.
Ladies and gentlemen, the services here are concluded. The interment service will continue at Shalom Memorial Park Cemetery, located at 1700 West Rand Road in Arlington Heights. The Shiva will continue at the Levy residence. For those of you who are here, all that information is on the service folder, as well as the memorial contribution information to Congregation Ezras Israel or Hillel Torah North Suburban Day School. For those of you who are joining us online, all that information as far as Shiva and memorial contribution you can find on our website. For those of you who will be driving in the funeral procession, the procession will be forming in our parking lot. Please obtain an orange safety funeral sticker to place on the right-hand side of your windshield. Have your bright lights and hazard lights on at all times. For additional measures of safety, we will be providing many of the cars with a flag that will be affixed to the top portion of your car. We'll have a car in the back of the procession to hopefully keep other cars from entering the procession. And for your own personal safety, I strongly recommend not talking on your cellular phone nor texting. Use your horn liberally as you're going through the intersections. The following people have been asked to serve as pallbearers. When I call your name, please stand next to Dr. Gerstein's casket. Howard Levy, Gavi Levy, Joey Levy, Donnie Shapiro, Michael Shapiro, Jeff Shapiro, Mark Gerstein, and Robert Gerstein. This time I invite everyone to rise and stand in place as we escort the casket of Dr. Shayle Jay Gerstein, along with Rabbi Falk and the entire Gerstein family from the chapel. Then you may return to your cars. Family, come this way, please.